head of gold, which we know is Nebuchadnezzar, and which was the Babylonian government. The second one was the silver, which was the Medo-Persian Empire, and that was the breastplate of silver, the breast. And then the stomach and the thighs of brass was Greece. And then we have the fourth one was Rome. It had two legs, and we learned that Rome, the Roman Church, broke into Eastern Orthodox and the Western Roman Catholic Church. And then finally, the last kingdom would be a kingdom that was unknown and undefined, except it was 10 toes that was iron mixed with clay, and it had no stability. And most people believe that to be the European Union that we've seen form in our lifetime. So that's the kingdoms that we're dealing with. But I want to go back now to what we know happened between the Babylonian captivity of the nation of Israel until Jesus came. Now, no doubt we have some things that happened after the 70 years. We all read Esther, Ezra, Nehemiah, and we know that along with them, Zechariah and Malachi and Zechariah, Haggai, that all of those fit in this time frame. But when Malachi is written, it's over. Nobody else speaks anymore. And so we assume that somewhere within 30 years after they were released back from their captivity, 30 to 100 years briefly, in that time frame, God quit speaking. And what they had was all they had, and they had to hold on to it. And I'm sure if God had written anything, he would have said, nevertheless, when I return, will I find faith on earth? Because he knew that was the condition the church was going to be in. So if you ever get antsy about where we are as a church or what's going on in the world, just remember that the church today is a picture and a reflection of what God knew it would be. So this does not surprise God, and it does not have to have an influence on you. The Bible is very plain. In the last generation of the church, which is the church of Laodicea, he says, if any man, that means any person, would hear his voice, would hear him knocking, ask him to come in, that he'd come in and sup with him, with you, and have fellowship with you. And so you shouldn't have to feel bad that that's going on. But let me go back now to 2,000 years plus now, and look at thereabouts, and look at what happened in this intertestament time. Babylon was overthrown during this time. You look at your deal, it says it begins with Israel back from captivity. Babylon's overthrown. 70 years has now passed. The controllers now of the world, which by the way, these were all world governments. Listen closely just a moment. Nimrod was the first of the world governments when he ruled from Babylon. From the Tower of Babel, you remember the story? When he ruled from Babylon, he was the first world order. He had, everybody spoke the same language, he had total control, and they built a tower unto God, to heaven. Their purpose was to make their own way, their own God. He wanted to rule the world, and he did. And that's exactly what Nebuchadnezzar did. He ruled the world. And so did the Medes and the Persians through Darius and through Xerxes, and so did Alexander the Great for the Greece, and so did the Caesars of Rome. And one day the Antichrist will rule over the whole world, over this revised Roman Empire, whatever it is. And so we're talking about world systems, not just local tyrants like Antiochus Epiphanes or even Adolf Hitler. They were nutcases, and Adolf Hitler, of course, in our history, our immediate history, he never ruled the world, but that was his purpose, to rule the world. So Babylon is overthrown, the nation of Israel is cast about. You can read with me, from one national rule to the other. There were 6 periods of control of Israel, fulfilling the prophecy of Daniel 2:7 through 9, and those 6 were not all world kingdoms. And so I've laid them out for us here. The number 2 is number 1 there. There's my numbering system that I told you should have been. I should have had Babylon number 1 in parentheses, and then Persian 2, Greek 3, and so forth. So if you want to correct that on your paper, it'll be fine. But shows you I didn't get off the internet. Amen. So Anyway, the Persians, Cyrus was the first in 536 BC that decreed that the Jews could go back and inhabit their homeland, whereby only 60,000 out of over 1 million Jews returned to Israel. We do not have an accurate number. They did not have a census, but most agree that probably from the dispersion they grew to about 1 million Jews in Babylon, and then when Babylon was taken over by the Medes and then the Persians, that these Jews were allowed to thrive and to flourish. And so there's over 1 million of them that are there, and only 60,000 went back. These are not exact numbers as you would expect, but it's there. And they returned to Israel. Isaiah 44:28 is the quote of this, where Cyrus, God said it was his shepherd, and that he would perform his pleasure, saying to Jerusalem, you'll be built. And in Isaiah 5:1, the Lord said to his anointed Cyrus, whose right hand I have golden, to subdue the nation before him. I'll loose the loins of kings to open for him the two-leaved gates, and the gates shall not be shut. And so Isaiah 44:28 and 45:1 are a biblical account that the Jews were under the control of the world power. Not only were they under the world power of Babylon, but also of the world power of the Persian. And I think I can show you and prove it to you. It's not an issue, and we'll look at some of them as we go through there, that the Jews have been under the control of the world power ever since. Now, you may disagree with me on this, and it's okay if you do, but there is a world power in effect today, but we're different than any world power that's ever been, and that is the United States of America. Is there any doubt in anyone's mind that we rule the world today? Is there any doubt? The difference is we don't make them do what we want. We don't collect taxes from them. We have a government that was founded on Christian principles, and ours is not one of dominion and of control. Ours is one of wanting to give them what we had. You notice I said had, past tense, freedom. Okay? So, you need a glass of water? You need a glass of water? Would you mind getting her a glass of water? All right. So I want us to look at it, and I want us to see tonight that the Persian was one that was transition of a world power that took over Babylon, and Cyrus, which, believe this or not, it doesn't matter. This is absolute rank speculation. I could have an argument and a fight with the finest scholars and the worst scholars, but I personally believe that Cyrus was the child, the product of the Persian king Ahasuerus and Esther. I just believe that. And the reason I believe that is I've studied it out, looked at it, and I've evaluated it, and the time frame is there, and it's possible. Whether it is or not, I don't know, but I will tell you this. He was undoubtedly a man that believed in the Jewish faith and that promoted the Jewish faith. It'd almost be natural because Nebuchadnezzar was saved. And I like what, I won't quote anybody, not but me, I like what I believe about it. I believe that this Nebuchadnezzar, as wicked as he was, got saved. And he said, no, you can't worship any God but Daniel's God. He was better than our president, because our president says you can worship any God you want. But he demanded they worship the true God of heaven. So we're going to go from the Babylon, the Persian, just going to skim through there. The Persian government was, these are all laid out for us in Daniel's book as God gave him greater revelation in chapters 8, 9, 10, 11, and it's an amazing picture. But I want to look at the Greek, because although it was only about 20 years in time frame, only about 20 years, amazing things happened. So I want to read to you, and not just me read it, but I want you to read it with me. That's the reason I printed it out so you can see this with your own eyes. In just 10 short years, Alexander the Great changed the world. Now, what I just said to you, he was only 33 years old. But his kingdom was set up by his father, Philip of Macedonia, who had it set up so when he came to power, he was a warrior ready to go, and he conquered the world. And so in 10 years, less than 20, and I'll emphasize that because if it had not been for the work of his father, pushing him and preparing him, Alexander would. But in 10 years, he ruled the whole world. But he died a mysterious death at Babylon, and his generals took it over. So his kingdom was not passed as it was by the other kings to one of his progeny, but it was taken by his 4 generals. We'll look at that. Notice that he destroyed most major cities except Jerusalem. Everywhere he went, he tore down the cities. He took the people of the city. He intermarried them with his own men. He would leave He would leave Greek men there they kill the men, leave the women alive, they had children by those women, and they became Greek. And so they were conquering the world by birthing children. And so that's the way he did. When he conquered an area, he destroyed the city, he set up a new kingdom there, and they brought in Greek men who would have Greek children, and that was their purpose in it. The only historical event concerning connecting Alexander the Great with the Jews is his visit to Jerusalem. He did not destroy Jerusalem because of a dream. This is right out of and I'll give it to you in case you want to look at it. According to Josephus, the Antiquities of the Jews, 11:8, pages 4 through 6. And if you don't get that, how many of you have a copy of Josephus' stuff? Okay, 2 or 3 of us. Okay, it's impossible to read straight through like a book. You have to be a lot smarter than the average bear, and I'm not. But you can read parts and pieces, and you'll have a reference to Josephus, or you can just sit down and pick it up and start looking, and you think, how does that fit? And you can work it out. But to actually read it, I've never read the Antiquities of the Jews. It's a volume set about this big and a nice fine small print. It's bigger than the Bible. But Josephus was a Jew during the Roman occupation of Israel. He was born after the crucifixion of Christ, but he gave a well-documented, well-appreciated and approved secular history of the Jewish nation, and he reaches all the way back to the beginning of time, and he goes clear up to the time that he lived. So he's invaluable. But this is a story right out of Josephus, and he had access to the priest, and these are the ones that told the story. So I read to you, and I just want you to see it. Alexander went to Jerusalem after having taken Gaza. Now, you remember where Gaza is? You ever heard the Gaza Strip? He'd been in Philistine country. He was coming up the coastline from his victory in Egypt, which, by the way, Jerusalem was the passageway through from Turkey to Egypt. And he was down there, and he comes in there. He's destroying from the south, from the north going south. I said backwards, going to Egypt, and he stops at Jerusalem, and he had a dream. This is what it says. He had a warning from God, received in a dream, in which he saw himself vested in a purple robe with his mitre, that's his hat, that had a golden plate on it, with the name of God was engraved on his head. Accordingly, he went to meet Alexandria at Sappha, a view of the temple, following all the priests, all the clothes in fine linen, and by a multitude of citizens, Judah awaited the coming of the king. So Alexander is coming, and Judah, who was the high priest, had this dream of Alexander the Great. And instead of being fearful, they've heard what's going on. He's killing and destroying everybody he comes to. He goes out and meets him at the best view of the temple you can get. He goes up on a high place, and he says, I want you to see this. Read with me. Judah waiting the coming of the king. When Alexander saw the high priest, he reverenced God. Leviticus, to the end of it, 13. And I can't tell you how that fits in Josephus, but that's there. And he saluted Judah, while the Jews with one voice greeted Alexander. When Parmenio the general gave expression to the army's surprise of Alexander's extraordinary act, that one who ought to be adored by all as king should adore the high priest of the Jews, Alexander replied, and here's a direct quote from Alexander the Great, according to Josephus, I did not adore him, but the God who hath honored him with his high priesthood. For I saw this very person in a dream, in this very habit, when I was at Dios in Macedonia, who, when I was considering with myself how I might obtain dominion of Asia, exhorted me to make no delay, but boldly to pass over the sea, promising that he would conduct my army and would give me the dominion over the Persians. Alexander then gave the high priest his right hand, went into the temple, offered sacrifice to God according to the high priest's direction, which, by the way, was a no-no. This guy was a Gentile, but when you know he's come to destroy your city and destroy your temple and going to kill all your women, all your men, and leave, you know what I'm saying? He bowed down to him. And it goes further, it says, treating the whole priesthood magnificently. And when the book of Daniel was shown to him, Daniel 7:6, after this I beheld into another like a leopard, which had upon him his back 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. and in Daniel 8, 5 through 8, and then verse 20 to 22, and in chapter 11, 3 and 4, wherein Daniel declared that one of the Greeks should destroy the empire of the Persians. He supposed that he was the person intended and rejoiced thereat. The following day, Alexander asked the people what favors he should grant them, and at the priest's request, he accorded them the right, listen to this, to live in full enjoyment of the laws of their forefathers. He furthermore exempted them from the payment of tribute in the 7th year of release. To the Jews of Babylon and Media, he also granted like privileges, and to the Jews who were willing to enlist in his army, he promised the right to live in accordance with their ancestral laws. This guy bent over backwards, accepted their religion, accepted their persons, actually put them into his army, and went on. And so this is an amazing event. The tragedy is, from my perspective, he only lived 10 years after, through this process. I wonder what kind of kingdom he would have had. But it was not God's plan. Well, from that point then, in this intertestament period, I want to use the term 20 years again, because it had not been for Philip of Macedonia, it would never have come for Alexander the Great to do what he did. But Alexander the Great died in about 323 BC. When he died at Babylon. There's lots of stories, and we don't know how he died. But however he died, this man, instead of having a child, he didn't have children, his 4 generals took over the kingdom. And now they rule the world, but instead of ruling under one head, they rule up. So these don't count in the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, but they do in the dreams that God showed to Daniel of this world dominion. And these 4 generals are remarkably shown in the book of Daniel, chapters 7, 8 through 11. They're, remarkable pictures. So, yes?
I read in Learn the Bible in 24 Hours by Chuck Missler that, and I'm going back to Cyrus, that Daniel, the prophet, actually went to Cyrus and showed him that scripture too. Have you heard that before? Because that was the first time I ever heard it.
No, I do. I've read a lot of commentaries, and I've never read that. Okay, but if Chuck Missler says that he's a lot smarter than me, I'd say he probably has good reason. But I'd like to know. You know, I have never heard that before, so I don't know. But I will say this: if I had the Bible, I've done this. I've shown people stuff that the Bible says and said, "This is talking about you," when I'm leading them to Christ and so forth. So if you have a Bible that has Cyrus' name in there, who wouldn't take that Bible and say, "Look here, buddy, it's in the ancient script right here." Who knows? But anyway, I had not read that or heard that. But thank you for that comment. Anyway, any other comment? I'm just talking the whole time, and are y'all following along with me? Is it okay? Are you gaining anything? The reason I wrote it down is I want you to see it with your own eyes. I want you to review it. If you have any interest, you can take any of these names I have here and go into your search engine and type in that name, and I'm telling you, it'll pop up and you read everything I'm saying and thousands of times more and learn about this stuff that went on that's there. I just wish I had the time to, I wish we had, in heaven we'll have it. Okay, the Egyptian, from the 4 generals of Alexander, of which came Alexander's son, Ptolemy Philadelphus, okay? We don't know if that was really his son, but that's what they call him. I don't believe he ever married, and although history tells a different story, I think it's interesting. Anyway, Ptolemy Philadelphus, who had the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, translated into the Greek, and is called the Greek Septuagint. Greek had become the language of the civilized world. This is the most major changes happened in all this time. The Hebrews only read Hebrew. They only spoke Hebrew. They only wrote in Hebrew. And that's all they knew. They had no other languages. And now they've changed so that when we get to Jesus, he not only is able to, which being God, he can speak any language he wants, but his people not only spoke Hebrew, if they were educated. If they weren't educated, they spoke probably Arabic, which is a mixed language. Aramaic, a mixed language. But they can speak Hebrew, they can speak Greek and Aramaic. And although the New Testament is written almost exclusively in Greek, Hebrews is written in Hebrew itself, the rest of it is written in Greek. The Greek Septuagint, which means the 70, is the Old Testament that had been compiled by Ezra was translated into Greek so that the whole world could read the Bible. This is amazing. I want you to know, and I've said this before and I'm going to say it again, if you don't believe the Bible, I can't help you. You can't get saved if you don't believe the Bible. And so when I talk to somebody, I said, do you believe the Bible? I said, no, I don't believe it. If I can show you that it's real and it's true, would you believe it? No, I just leave them. I can't help them. I can't, what I believe, they had a preacher on Fox News this morning or yesterday morning, talking, and he kept saying, I believe this and I believe that. It was about in God we trust. They're talking about putting on the money and on buildings and states. There's 16 states, which I didn't know this, only 16 states that recognize in God we trust on buildings. The rest of them, they don't have it, state buildings and so forth. But anyway, he kept saying, I believe this and I believe that. And I said out loud, I don't care what you believe. What does the Bible say? You know? My point is this, is that they translated the Bible from an ancient language that was dying. Wasn't dead yet, but it was almost dead. It was dying, and that language now is in the language of the common man so they can read it. This is very much a big harbinger of the debate we're having today over different versions of the Bible. The King James only crowd versus the modern day language crowd. I think that the devil saw a way to destroy us, and I think y'all know my position on that. If you don't, another day we'll talk about it. I just believe that God is able to use His word however it's translated, but there's some better than others. But there are purists that won't even refer to the Greek Septuagint. They say it's so foul. I say it's the best they had, and if there's only one word in the whole book that's right, God can use that one word to save a soul, okay? But they during this time, they developed the Bible, and now wherever, listen, this word I'm about to use, civilization goes. Wherever civilization goes, they read in Greek and they speak in Greek. Even the Roman government that later takes over the whole world speaks in Greek as well as Latin, which is the language of their own people. And I don't have a clock, I don't have a watch. Anybody know what time it is?
7:30.
3 minutes till? Wow. I'm sorry I'm so slow. Let me bring us down to the Syrian rule. I can't go with it. I'm going to stop here. Let me ask you to make your mark on number 4 there. We'll talk more about this next time we meet and talk. It won't be Sunday, it'll be next Wednesday night. Please read it, look at it, do what I said, get in your search engine, look at it, and see if you find things that you say, you know what, I read that and I don't agree with you on that. That's all right with me, and I'd like to hear why you don't agree, and I'm not likely to change my view, but I might. And yes.
I'm sorry, can you repeat again? Did you say you kind of believe Cyrus was Esther and
I believe it's,
Xerxes'
I do,
child
I believe
in
it.
the timeline?
I do.
That's what
Jeannie
I
and I
thought
had
you
a
said.
debate
I
over the
just wanted
phone.
to say it again.
Yeah, we had a debate on the phone a couple of weeks ago. She said, I don't know about that. So she's my scholar at large here, and she looked up, and I'll let you say what you said.
So Daniel and Esther were contemporaries? I thought he was.
No, Daniel, it's very likely Daniel was alive
Yeah.
during that time, but when you say contemporaries, not in this
But
sense.
Cyrus and Daniel were contemporaries. I mean,
So Miss Claire thinks.
Well, that's what she brought up. I think it stretches Daniel too old.
Okay.
Tell them what you said. Did you do it off the cuff? Okay, so you don't want to tell us it.
No, I'm just curious.
Well, my position is this. Daniel died a very old man. How old he was, we don't know. He went into captivity as a very young man. How young he was, we don't know. The Bible is gracious not to tell us. But if you take his timeline and the release of the 70 years, he certainly was under Darius, which was a Mede, and the Persians melted, and was there, we know, during that time, because Darius the Mede is one that threw him in the lion's den. And so whether or not he lived long enough for Cyrus to be born, I don't know. I don't think so.
But Esther was, I thought Esther was after.
After what?
I thought Esther was after.
Well, we don't know when Esther fits. That's the key to this whole
We
thing.
don't really.
We don't know. In my opinion, we're talking my opinion in a minute. In my opinion, Esther fits right in with Nehemiah and Ezra. Matter of fact, I think if you set her right in the middle of Ezra, you've got her right where she belongs.
I'm just trying to
But
get straight.
there's lots of scholars in this curriculum, and I don't claim to be a scholar, I'm just a Bible student. And so
But Esther right in the middle of Ezra. Cyrus happened before Zerubbabel and Ezra.
yeah, if you follow the typical timeline. And I don't think anybody knows the
I'm
timeline.
just wondering,
Just go.
there has to be some kind of connection because they honored him so much. And why? Because probably Queen Esther had some influence somehow.
Yeah.
I mean, I can understand all that, I'm just trying to fit it all in my mind.
But the bottom line is, Esther had an effect on the whole situation. And,
It was wise in it,
yeah,
400 years later, right?
yeah,
Never loved it.
undoubtedly.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4+ years. Well, we're out of time, and I wish we could have had a discussion starting the service, but and if you want to hang around Sunday afternoon, we won't go any further. We'll talk about what we got. Go look it up and tell me what you think. Be a Berean for a change. Maddie, can you do that? Look up about Cyrus and Esther and see if there's any kinship there.
Okay.
You're my go-to girl. All right. Well, let's pray together, okay? Thank you for being here tonight, and God richly bless you. And I pray that you'll be all here. Please call your friends, your neighbors, your loved ones, and invite them to come to our meal Sunday. We'll try to have room for them. All right. Chuck, would you mind dismissing us in prayer?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Lord, for this day and the sermon, and let us all go home safely tonight and have a good day Sunday. In your name I pray, amen.
Amen.